just a sec to actually get my computer working for me. Oh, hey, the computer works, but the mouse is dead. It's all right, we're rolling with it, we're improvising. All right. I don't know who keeps putting the thing up there where I can't reach it, but we have technology. All right. Let's see. Where was I? Physics is the study of the universe. You've been studying the universe your whole life. General tips again. Pretty much everything I talk about this semester is, again, something that you've already observed happening around you. And again, the way I'm going to be teaching the course is to help you understand the observations you've already made, put words to it, and then use math about it, because this is going to be a pretty math-based course. Now, I do want to focus on the concepts. We're going to focus on the concepts, on the terminology that physicists use. But the thing about physics is physicists use math as a language to describe the universe around us. So there's no way around it. This is going to be a math-based course. Now, your relationship with math may vary. That is okay. Basically, the first week of the class is going to be going over all the math concepts that we're going to need for the course before we start doing anything with them. So if you haven't had algebra in a minute, we're going to review it. We're also going to talk about units of measurement and how we're going to be using all of them. We're going to get a foundation going before we get too deep into the weeds. I just want to advise you again, don't panic, especially if you don't have depending on what your relationship with math and science is, it's okay. This course is designed for intro. And focus on the concepts and then use those concepts to help us with the math, because even though it is a math-based course, I don't think of the problem, like the math questions in this class, as being sort of like traditional, number crunching like you'd see in a math class where you just have an endless wall. I might be biased here. In a math class, you might see an endless wall of just problems that you have to manually do the same thing to over and over again. But physics questions, in my opinion, are a little bit more like logic puzzles, because you are trying to apply what you've seen of the universe to them. And physicists use math as a language to describe what's going on around them. As an example, let's look at one of the most famous physics equations. Does this one look familiar to anyone? It's okay if it doesn't, I'm just curious. A couple nods. This is Newton's second law, which we'll talk about in a few weeks. This formula reads net force equals mass times acceleration. And as a physicist, I can look at this and not only use it to calculate things, but I can also read it as words to describe the relationship between all of these physics concepts. Again, in physics, we use math as a language. So when I try to describe this linguistically, I would say that if you exert a force on an object with mass, it's going to accelerate. Which, again, is something that you would have noticed, because if you have something that is stationary and you want to make it move, if you want to change its motion, cause it to accelerate, you exert force on it. So, again, you already know this, even if you're not used to using the math to say it. And so every time we talk about a new concept, first we're going to go over the words we use for it. We're going to talk about how all of the things you've observed tie into the concept in question, talk about what words we use to describe it, and then I'm going to show you what formulas are used to calculate it or what formulas that concept is used in. For every new concept, every new formula, I'm going to make sure you understand what it is, what it means, what it's used for. And this course will also have a formula sheet that will be provided to you that you can use on literally every assignment. You don't have to create one from scratch, you don't have to memorize all your formulas because, well, frankly, if you were a professional scientist one day, you would have a bunch of reference books at your desk while you're doing your professional science. Therefore, you don't have, if you were a professional physicist, you wouldn't need to memorize all of them because you have your reference books there. Therefore, you do not need to memorize all of them. You will have a formula sheet. And you can write on it, make notes on it, etc., etc. Any questions so far? I know I'm rambling a little bit, but that's kind of just how the first couple days goes, isn't it? Feel all right so far? All right. So that's sort of the basics about the course itself. Before we move on much further, allow me to introduce myself a little bit, because, well, I'm going to be the one standing up here talking for the entire course, so my goal is for you to be comfortable with me standing up here. I shouldn't have swallowed some of that ice. Hello again, I'm Joshua Hoffbauer, and it's nice to meet you all. Minor note, just because some part of my brain doesn't like spreading misinformation. Some of you might have emailed me up until the class starting, like having a question about the course. And in emails like that, someone may have assumed to call me Dr. Hoffbauer. And I don't technically have my doctorate yet. I don't want to accidentally make someone think that I have something that I don't. I just don't like, I have a thing about that. So, just disclaimer, I do have a master's in physics, but I don't have my doctorate yet. So, technically I'm not Dr. Hoffbauer. Don't want to make anyone think that I have that when I don't. Most of my students just call me Mr. Hoff or Prof. Hoff, just any variation of my last name, just depending on your preference. So, small thing, just wanted to address that. But I actually, about 10, 12 years ago now, was sitting where you guys are sitting. I was a physics student here at PC, and I graduated with my physics degree from here in 2014, and now I'm back, and it's honestly been a great time. I like teaching here. I like being back where I started. It is a little weird standing here rather than there, but it's a good change. It also means that, granted, it's been a decade, things aren't quite exactly the same, but I do have experience being a student at this school. So I do want the student experience in this school and in my class to be as beneficial for you guys as possible. So again, if you have questions, please let me know. And if you have any issues or needs, I also want to know about that. I want this to be a good course. I want the school to be a good fit for you guys. I'm also a big nerd, basically. You kind of have to be if you're going to be a scientist professionally. And I enjoy talking about nerd stuff. I also especially enjoy when students ask me seemingly random questions, like I encourage people to just ask any oddball science thing that pops into their head. I don't care if what I'm talking about doesn't relate at all. If you are wondering about how black holes work, please ask me. I want you to ask your silly random questions, because this is a science class. If you have a science thought, ask it, legitimately. It's my favorite part of this job to talk about how lightsabers work, or black holes, or faster than light travel, or how Superman's powers could possibly be a thing. Please ask me those things when they pop into your head. It is my favorite part of my day. In addition to asking any questions you have about the course and what we're talking about. Again, I stumble over my words a lot, excuse me. When I stop and ask, do you have questions? I really do mean it. I want you to interrupt me. I build it into the way that I teach. It is okay to get me off topic. It is okay to cut off the flow of the class. I'd rather you ask and me have to rework the whole day than you not ask and just be confused or not ask the fun question, all right? Before we move on, any questions? Serious or otherwise?
What do you write about?
I am currently struggling to write a novel, quote unquote. I suppose then if you were asking about genre, it's a fantasy story. If you couldn't tell from, say, this part, when you play enough Dungeons and Dragons, you tend to just have too many characters, and if you can't play them all, you just tend to start writing books about them. So, that's what I'm currently working on, but writing, or at least creative writing, is not exactly my forte, so it's taking me time to struggle to actually get the words out. So I've been working on the same thing for about years, plural, at this point. Anything else on your minds before we move on to the boring technical class details?
What's a pangolin?
A pangolin, I keep forgetting my mouse is dead. So imagine a cross between an armadillo and a porcupine, and you get these guys. They're about the closest thing a mammal can get to a dinosaur, and I think they're adorable. They are related to anteaters. Anteaters and armadillos. Actually, yeah, better describe them as a cross of those two things. And because they're related to anteaters, they do have the tongue. Yes?
Who's in the back of that picture?
That is my wife.
Nice.
All right, anything else on your minds for right now? Keeping in mind, you can please interrupt me at any time.
What's a corvid?
What?
A corvid?
Crows. Crows and ravens, that family of birds. Yes.
What was your longest D&D game?
Like longest running?
Yeah.
Probably the first campaign I was involved in. I was in that one for 2.5, maybe 3 years. It wasn't the first character I ever made, but it was the first actual game that I played. And I ran a ranger, which, if you know anything about Dungeons and Dragons, meant that I had to get very creative to be effective. Alright. Again, keep reaching for this as if it will work. Any questions you have, anytime, interrupt me. I really do mean it. Now, let's move on to the boring stuff that we have to do on the first day, go over the syllabus and all those technical details. I store the syllabus on the course Brightspace page, which, if you cannot access that yet, I want you to tell me so I can make sure you gain access. I always have issues getting all my students into the course Brightspace page because of how this course works. When you signed up for this class, you probably chose one of 4 different sections for Phys1000 because there's 2 different lectures and 2 different labs, and so 2 times 2 is a combination of 4 different sections you could have signed up for. E and F are the 2 lecture letters, and then the 2 lab letters are W and X. So some combination of like FX, VW, things like that. Because there's 4 sections, it always takes time for me to get everyone wrangled into the correct Brightspace page, because I want everyone lumped into the same one. If you cannot access the course Brightspace page, I want you to tell me, and I would prefer if you told me by emailing me, because frustratingly, that trope about absent-minded scientists is absolutely true. It's So if you tell me in person, I'm very liable to forget it 2 minutes later, which I feel horrible about, but we work within our limitations. It most benefits me if you email me things, because then I physically have a record of it in my email inbox that I can keep visible. So that is my email address if you did not already have it, jahoffbow, they cut off the last 2 letters of my last name, @presby.edu. If you are not currently in the course Brightspace page, I want you to tell me, preferably by emailing me, and I will make sure that you are added to it post haste. I'm going to log into Brightspace and show you what you should see or will eventually see. The course in question is Hoffbauer, Physics of How Things Work, Spring 24. So if you are in the course, you should be able to see that on your homepage. If you are not in the course and don't see that, again, please email me. We load up the course itself. I'm in the process of rebuilding all of my Brightspace stuff because this course has changed textbooks, so I have to rewrite everything. The 2 tabs that we have right now are Introductions and Resources and Chapter 1. Right now we're still in Introductions, so that's what I'm going to click on. And contained within this tab, we have, first of all, the tab itself. The way that Brightspace works is you can click on a proper tab to expand it, and then it'll sometimes have something to say within the tab itself. So in that first tab, we have information from me about the class. For example, mentioning that this is our lecture classroom, Richardson 115. So if I refer to the lecture room or 115, this is the room I'm referring to. And a list of tips for passing the class. Every other tip is please ask your questions. If you ever read it, every other tip is ask questions. I really do mean it. Now, stored within this tab are several documents. First here is an older version of the course formula sheet. I'm in the process of rewriting this as well, because with the new textbook, all the chapter numbers have changed. It's still an okay formula sheet, so if you need one in the short term, you can absolutely look at this, but I am in the process of rewriting it. It's a fine resource for now, just gonna move a few things around and change the chapter numbers. But the updated formula sheet will be listed here as well, so you can come here to get it once it's ready. Also within this tab is the syllabus, which we're about to go over, and also I put all of my notes and slideshows on Brightspace for you guys as well. So if you ever need to access, if you ever want to access what I'm putting on the board every day, those will be posted here as well. So this is where those will be, and now let us look at the syllabus. Everyone's favorite part. Syllabus for this course. First mentions course name, my office, Richardson 109 E and F. Just to point it out for everybody, if you are trying to find my office from this room, you exit the door, you turn right, and it's the last door on the left. It's sort of a 2-part room, because most of the physics room, teachers' rooms here have, you open the door and first you see a little lab space, and then you get to the office. So E is the lab space, F is my office where I sit. I got my email address again. Office hours are after lecture on Monday and Friday, and please email me literally any time of day with any questions if you want to set up a meeting outside of office hours, or if you just have a question while you've been studying or working on your homework. When I say I want to know what your questions are, I even mean outside of lecture, and I even mean email me at midnight. I might not get back to it immediately because I might be asleep, but I will get you an answer. I will make sure of that. please email me. Please ask me questions, please email me things, especially if you have a need or a concern come up. My email's routed to my phone, I will get to them. And the link to the YouTube channel where I post all of my lecture recordings is here as well. It's a very boring channel titled Prof Off Physics. It's got everything I recorded for the past 3 to 4 years. So if you ever want to go watch a very old version of the course, you can, but every lecture day, the new recordings will be posted here shortly after class. I shouldn't have that close bright space. I can be very silly. Pardon me 1 second. All right. Continuing on with pertinent course details. This is our classroom, the room we are currently in. I do teach 2 sections of this particular course, 2 different lectures, one right after the other. E refers to this time slot, 10:30 to 11:20, and then F refers to the following time slot, 11:20, right? Yeah, 11:20 to 12:20. That means that I'm in this room for 2 hours in a row, so as you guys filter out, the next group is likely when you filter in. Now, additionally, teaching the same thing twice in a row, I don't necessarily care which of the 2 lectures you attend, because as long as there's room in the room, I don't care which time you come to. So if for whatever reason, sitting in on the other one just makes more sense for you on a given day, if your schedule allows for it, feel free to do that, I don't care. Related to that, I also don't take attendance, like at all, because we're all adults. You can manage your time. You can decide what you need to be doing with your time. That means if you are ever sick or out on sports or just having a health day for any reason, you can just not be here. That is fine. You don't even have to tell me. Please feel comfortable. If you miss a day, you don't have to justify it. You don't have to email me. It's fine, legitimately. You're responsible for learning though, so if you miss a day, you should figure out what you missed, either by talking to your classmates, watching the video recordings, reading over the notes that I post online. Does that sound fair? All right. Lab time, little bit different for this one. There's 2 labs this semester. They are both at the same time of day, but one is Tuesday, one is Wednesday. Your syllabus, your course schedule, the section you signed up for will tell you which of the 2 days you're supposed to come to. W is Tuesday and X is Wednesday. Would have been nice if W was Wednesday, but the alphabet didn't quite work that way for some reason. Now for lecture, you can attend any one of the 2 that you want. Lab is a little bit different because lab is specifically allocated to have a certain number of students in the room so that there's a certain number of groups at a specific size. So do attend whichever lab you're supposed to come to, and if you're going to miss lab, please let me know so we can figure out how you're going to make that lab grade up. We have about 10 labs within the semester. I will tell you if for any reason we're not having lab in a given week, because some weeks we're just going to not have lab. For example, this week, no lab this week. We will start attending lab next week instead. But no lab for this week. If we don't have lab in a given week, I will make sure to tell you. On the weeks we do have lab, the way that it'll work is you'll show up to the lab room, which I'm realizing isn't written here. That's unfortunate. Our lab room is 126, which, again, you just kind of mirror how you get there from here. Exit this door, turn to the left, and it's the last door on the right as you're heading towards the bio building. Very last room on the right. And whenever your lab day is, show up at that room at 1:30 and you'll work with your team to accomplish the objective. There's no work that you have to do prior. There's no extra research or lab report stuff. You show up, you do the thing, you go home. Sound fair? All right. And again, no lab this week. You have this Tuesday/Wednesday off from lab. Any questions so far? All right. Now, I use a 10-point grading scale, so if you have a 90, you have an A. And the school doesn't do A pluses, unfortunately, but if something does have a plus, I do the plus. So 80 to 89 is a B, and say if you've got an 87 and I can't possibly round up any higher, you'll get the B plus. And this is the weighting for all of the various assignments in the course. I will make sure that, sorry, words are hard sometimes. Lab is a part of this class. Some other science departments on campus have a 3-hour course and then a 1-hour lab that is sort of detached. The physics department makes it one 4-hour class. Lab is a part of this one 4-hour course. For that reason, labs make up 25% of your total grade in the class. Tests, plural, make up 50%, and then the final exam is 25%. We have 2 tests within a semester, so each single test is itself 25% of your grade. And this is just the rubric that I use to calculate your final score at the end and that you can use to figure out your score as well. Moving on down the first page. We list the course textbook. Looks exactly like this. It is listed as optional in that it is generally recommended for you to have this because it is the reference book that the course is based on, and it does have the homework questions and the answers in it, but it is not required in that, 1, I'll make sure you have notes for everything, and 2, I also post copies of all the homework as well. So it's a good idea to have this, especially if you like having a reference book. Sometimes it might word something in a different way than I do, but it is not, strictly speaking, required, because I will make sure that all the homework and stuff you have access to regardless. What is required is some form of scientific calculator, because again, this is going to, at least in part, be a math-focused class. It does not have to be a Texas Instrument like this. When I say scientific calculator, I mean that it has to be able to handle trigonometry, sine, cosine, tangent, exponents, and actually that's it. Trigonometry and exponents. You need some calculator that can do those things that isn't your laptop and isn't your phone, because those are the 2 things that you can't be using during a test. So you have until test 1 to make sure you have some form of scientific calculator. It doesn't, again, have to be one like this. It could be a $20 one as long as it can handle an exponent and sine, cosine, tangent, okay? As long as it isn't your phone or your computer. We also got listed here all the different stuff we're going to be talking about this semester. We tend to start off in the beginning looking at force and motion, the 2 fundamental things that people tend to, that at least, early man was first able to notice and start writing about. And then we move on to more complicated things like energy and momentum and gravity, and at the very end of the course, waves and electricity. We're just going to kind of go through the basics of as many concepts as we can, again, to try to make sure that by the time the course is done, you've got a base understanding of how these concepts affect your life on this planet. Questions so far? All right. Just going to try to blitz through the last of this thing. Page 2 talks about all the different types of assignments you're going to be working on this semester. This course does have homework, but if you might have noticed, if I scroll back up here, homework is not included in your grade weighting because the homework is basically practice. It's a study guide. It's the thing you should be doing outside of class to make sure you are ready for the labs and the tests. So it is not a part of your grade. However, you should still be doing it, but it's not graded in this, for the strict reason that it's a pain for both of us for you to have to scramble week to week to get a bunch of physics questions done and then hand it into me, and then a pain for me to have to physically grade all of them to try to get you your feedback back quickly. So instead, the purpose of the homework is for you to practice. For every chapter we go through, I'm going to list on Brightspace, for example, let's look at the chapter 1 tab here. I'm going to list on Brightspace what questions you should look at either in the chapter in the textbook or separately in the document copy that I post. So for example, if you do have the book, you would turn to chapter 1 in that book and look at questions 1, 13, and 25. And note, I only ever assign ones that the answers would be in the back of the book so that you can check them. Because again, the point of the homework is practice. Practice that you can also work on with each other. I in fact encourage you to work together on homework. Because if one of you gets it and the other person doesn't, it actually helps both of you to talk about it. Because it helps the person who doesn't get it to get it, and it helps the first person study it by having to explain it. So, work together on homework. It's practice. It's not graded, but you should do it anyway. And another reason so that it isn't graded is just to make your life easier. You don't have to stress about when you're doing it and when you're handing it in. Just do it at your leisure. And we'll take time before any given test to make sure that we breathe and look over any homework questions you guys are having to do the homework to study for the test. And again, so that you don't physically need to lug the book around with you all the time. Sometimes Brightspace is weird about displaying my documents. Within the Chapter 1 tab, I've got the slideshow I use for Chapter 1 and a written copy of the relevant homework questions if you don't want to lug the book around with you, and a second document that has the answers. So again, the answers are either in the book or on here. You can access either or both. So, we have homework, it is practice, please work on it together, please work on it, period. It's not graded, to try to be less stressful for all of us. What is graded is labs. You do have to come to lab, you do have to do your labs. Labs are 25% of the course, there's gonna be about 10 labs. So each lab individually is about 2.5% of your grade, which is to say, don't miss any of them if you can avoid it. Now, it's inevitable that someone is going to miss labs at some point because we have sports and illnesses and things that we can't avoid. So if you are going to miss a lab, I want you to let me know. We can figure out when you can do, like, either make up that lab or we'll figure out something else for you to do instead so that you don't just have a 0 sitting in your grade book. If you're, like, any reason you miss it, I want you to tell me, we'll figure out a replacement grade. At minimum, at the end of the semester, I always post an extra makeup lab activity that you can do. So, like, if you miss one, your general options are we can figure out a way for you to make it up then. But furthermore, at the end of the course, there is an extra one that I post that people can do if they missed one to fill in for a blank grade. Yes?
Is the extra credit if we get all of them?
Yes, actually. I do offer, there's some specific pre-decided extra credit options, and that is one of them. If you didn't miss a lab and you do the extra one anyway, that can count as extra credit. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
All right. We'll talk a little bit more about labs as we start having them, but general things to know for right now. Do attend the lab that you're scheduled to attend for. You'll be working in groups of about 2 to 3 on a given experiment each week. We don't have lab this week. We will start having labs normally scheduled next week. And bring your calculator and be ready to work with other people. But the labs are all self-contained. You don't have to bring anything other than your calculator and your notes. Next, tests. We will have 2 normal tests within the semester. Tests are cumulative to whatever we've covered up until that point. Although test 2 will focus, well, for example, let me rewind slightly. I've tentatively selected test dates already. That is subject to change based on the flow of the course and any other things that pop up, but I've got the tentative test dates here already. Test 1 will focus primarily on the thing, well, it'll focus exclusively on the things we cover between now and then. I plan to cover up to chapter 7 by that point. We'll cover about 1 to 2 chapters every week. And on test day, the way that I do my tests is I use lab time for them. So on the week of a test, note that there's 2 days listed here because there's 2 times that lab meets in a given week. On the week of a test, instead of coming to lab to do a normal lab that week, you would instead come here to take your test within lab time. And And I do that for a couple of reasons. One, if I write an hour-long test, I don't want you to have to rush in here, take it in 50 minutes, and then rush to your next class. That's not fair for anybody, especially if you've got academic accommodations and need to spend time and a half on it, and that just eats into your next class, and it's just not a good idea. So I use lab time for that, so instead, you have lunch, you come in at 1:30, and you can spend as long as you need to on it. I do write the tests with the intent of them taking 1 hour, but you have up to 3 anyway, which also helps account for anyone who has double time or time and a half or something like that. So, on the week of a test, note again, I've listed both the Tuesday and the Wednesday of that week, you would come here instead of lab to take the test instead of having a normal lab. So if there wouldn't be a normal lab that week, you'd come take the test instead. And the way that the tests work is, it'll be a self-contained document that you work on your own in here, and there's extra credit built into them. And I also make sure to spend lecture time prior to the test, making sure everyone feels okay before it happens. And then I'll make sure to try to grade it promptly, and we'll spend a day in class going over it. These again are the 2 tentative test dates, subject to change if anything outside of my current plan happens. Test 2 is cumulative up to test 2, just in the sense that all the stuff from test 1 still builds up to the stuff from test 2. I'll also point out there may be more chapter numbers contained in test 2, but that's because we're skipping a bunch of them, kind of jumping straight from 14 to 20. So don't be intimidated by there being a wider band of chapters here. It's still going to be about 7 chapters we actually cover. Questions on tests? All right, exams happen at the end of the semester. I've got the 2 pre-scheduled exam times here as well. And they'll work the same as the tests, just longer. Literally the formatting will be the same. It's just the whole semester instead of about half each. So once you've taken both tests, the exam formatting will be comfortable, I hope. And page 3 is a tentative schedule for the entire course. Again, tentative, because I cannot predict the future. For example, this week we're working on introductions. We're going to go over all the math stuff that we need. Then we're going to start talking about motion and Newton's laws, momentum and energy, and then we have test 1 mid to end of February. And I've also accounted for spring break and stuff on here. And page 4 is all those tips that I listed on Brightspace. Again, pretty much every other tip is please ask questions when you have them. And the last page is important technical information for being a student here, such as making sure you get your health needs met and very other important details that are on everyone's syllabus. So, how do you guys feel? Any questions, needs, concerns from you guys right now? Yes? Yes. Well, say for instance, if I spend a week teaching a chapter, you wouldn't know some of it until the end of that week anyway. So, at the very least, I would say by the time I would say a chapter is done, at that point you should be able to finish it. I would still say be working on it and looking over it as the week goes on, because even if you can't finish it yet, looking ahead at what you are going to do helps speed up the process when you get to it later. So definitely be looking at it over the week. Does that answer the question? Okay. Anything else in your minds right now? All right, that's syllabus day done. On Wednesday, we'll start talking about intro physics and algebra and stuff. Let me know if you need anything. Email me if you're not in the Brightspace course, and please have a wonderful day. See you all. Sorry.